All right. Hi, everyone. You just heard from Emily in Computer Services, who is thankfully assisting me today. It looks like everyone I'm expecting is on. If at any point you have questions, you can unmute and ask, or you can see me after the meeting, depending on whatever your comfort level is. So today we're talking about the new rules analysis tool. For folks who've been here in prior years, the process whereby you would fill out charts in Microsoft Word and email them to me, that has gone away. We have an entirely new process now. I'm going to walk you through how to do that. There is also an instruction sheet, and of course, you can always see me with any questions. After I walk through the tool for new drafters or anyone who would like a refresher, I'll briefly go over sort of an example bill and sort of talk through like how I would think about it and approach it, and like go through the actual research process to find rules that might be implicated. Folks who don't feel they need that refresher can go ahead and sign off once we talk through the new tool. All right, so our new
one more. Sorry, Jack, just
Yeah.
one more thing. I just want to make sure everybody realized that the instructions that Jack mentioned are attached to the meeting. So you should be able to click on that to pull those up, or there's also a link in the body of the meeting request as well.
Yep, and I'll show you. Those are also just permanently on our website. I'll show you that here in a second as well. So the new tool is not in link. It's only accessible via our website. It's sort of a new process, probably not like anything you've dealt with before. So to get to it, and can everyone, can you see the website? In theory, my screen share should be showing that.
Yes, Jack, you're good.
We're going to go to the website here, go to the bottom, and we're going to click on applications. It's where you find various other things like my requests. You may need to sign in. That's just your usual username and password. If you're already signed in, you won't need to do that. So to get to the new tool, we're going to go to applications, this gray box here to the left. We're going to go to rules analysis, if you see my cursor there. To the left of this link is a little PDF icon that takes you directly to the instructions. So in addition to the link and emailing to it, you can always find the instructions here at this link. So we're going to click on rules analysis. Now this will look a little bit different from me because I have multiple roles here, but you should be automatically taken to this drafter view. In theory, the session up here in the left should automatically be set to 89.1. If it's not, you can click and just go to 89.1. Also, in theory, you should see here a list of all of the bills that you drafted that were enacted this session. I think there was only one veto. In theory, vetoed bills should not show up here. If you have any weird situations where you drafted a bill, but someone else is doing the rules analysis, or you both are doing portions of it or whatever like that, talk to me and I'll help you sort it out. This discussion just assumes that you've got a list of bills that you drafted that you and only you are going to work on. So you work through your bills one by one, and like it says in the memo, you can take these one at a time. That you don't need to wait and submit them all at once. You can take an easy one first to kind of explore the system. No need to take your 100-page bill and do that one first. So we're going to pick one here and just sort of talk through the process a little bit. I'm going to talk about House File 384. This right here, this link on the actual bill number, that's going to take you to the actual bill. You can click that and it'll take you to Bill Book if you just need ready access to look at the bill text. To actually start analyzing it, you're going to click this blue Edit Bill button. All right, so here we get to our actual process for analyzing a bill. Now, the easiest possible scenario is if your entire bill doesn't require rules at all. Like if it doesn't even implicate the executive branch, for example. Then that's really easy, and because we're only talking about rules under Chapter 17A here, if your bill doesn't touch that at all, then you just got a one-stop shop. You can click this button right here, no rules required, and that automatically tells the system all sections of my bill do not implicate rules at all. And then all you got to do is finish up. And the way you finish up once you're done analyzing a bill is you go to the status drop down and you click drafter analysis complete. And you're done. You do not need to print it. You don't need to email me. I am automatically sent the information I need. So whenever you are finished with any bill, click status, drafter analysis complete. Now let's assume, as is the case for many bills, it's more complicated than that. If you have one or more sections in your bill that implicate rules, then you're going to go through this process. Going down through here, you will see a single row for every single section of your bill. This will most likely include even sections that have been item vetoed. You can just treat those as not involving any rules. So we're going to see a row for every section. One thing that will often make your life a lot easier is combining rows. We'll talk about that in just a sec. But how to edit a particular row for a bill section. First, we click this orange button. That tells the system, hey, I'm working on this row now. And we click the edit section information button here, this blue button. That sort of activates that row so you can start messing with that section. You're going to start off with one of your three statuses for that bill section. Rules required. If it explicitly requires rules, or if it's going to put some rules out of date, they're going to need to be fixed. Rules authorized or implicated, if it says may adopt rules or something like that, or if you're just not sure. This is also used for sort of our gray area. Or you select no rules involved if the section does not affect rules at all. We'll just pick one here to keep the discussion going. Next, you'll enter in the agency that has to do rules. You can just type in a letter and it generates a drop down for you. So if I want to do DAS, I start typing in administrative, and then I can pick from the drop down. You don't enter anything in on your own. In theory, this drop down has every single rulemaking agency in it. If you find you need to enter something that isn't in here, come talk to me. Just type something in here. Next, code section relating to rulemaking. This has two different parts. First, any section, any portion of the code touched by the bill section should in theory automatically be here for the code section in the Act. Down below here, if you have relevant code material not in that bill section, that's where you can type that in. So for example, if this bill requires rules by the Alcoholic Beverage Division, but the bill section doesn't specifically talk about rules, but we know rules still need to happen anyway when looking at the broader context, then we'd look for some other code section we could cite. So we'd probably try to find a section generally authorizing the division to do rules, something like that. Now, if you need to go deeper than the section level, this drop down, you can always hit that trash button to start over. This drop down only has auto population down to the section level. So if I want to do this, and then I really want to cite subsection 1, then I just have to manually type in this little white box, 123.10, subsection 1. Next, we'll go over, and depending on the size of your screen, you may want to use your arrow keys to kind of slide back and forth. There's a slider automatically programmed in here. So if you're on a narrower screen or on a laptop, here's how you can sort of move back and forth. Also, you can use this button up here to shrink that side menu if you want a little more room. And click it again to bring it back. So next column, I want to enter in any current rules that may need to be changed. And once again, there's a little drop down here. Once again, it only goes down to the rule level. So there's Agency 185, Chapter 10, Rule 1. If I want to really enter in sub-rule 2, again, I can just type that in. And once again, you can always hit the trash icon if you want to get rid of something and start over. This last column on the far right, don't worry about it. That's my job. All right, so we've got a section here How can we handle some more complicated scenarios? The most useful thing you can do is merging sections together. Oftentimes you might have a 50-section bill and 10 of those sections scattered throughout all deal with the same thing and are only going to probably result in one set of rules on one subject. We can combine all of those and make our life much simpler. So we can click the, show you that again. This turquoise chain link merge sections button. And then in here, we can type in all the merging that we want to do. Notably, there are no spaces in here, but it gives you a good example here. If you want to add 1, 2, and 3 through 6, and 7, 8, 9, so on, you click all that in, type in whatever you want to do, click merge sections, and poof, sections 1 to 3 are merged. And now you only have a single row for all of those sections. Anytime you think it makes sense to merge, go ahead and do it. Also, if you've merged and you decide you don't want to, click edit again, merge, and you can use this same process to essentially unmerge them. Say I decide I only want 2 and 3 to be together, not 1, 2, and 3. I click that, look here, and 1 is broken out from 2 and 3 again. So you can play around with that a little bit. Like I said, you can do a lot of merging all at once, or you can do small merges, etc. The other thing I'll note is sometimes you'll have a single bill section that's going to require rulemaking by multiple agencies. It's uncommon, but it happens. So there are basically 2 scenarios where that might come up. One, agencies are going to have to do 2 different sets of rules for 2 different agencies coming out of a bill section. So how do you do that? Let's say sections 2 and 3, they're going to require rules by 2 different agencies. I've already filled it out for alcoholic beverages. I like that. And then say hypothetically, it's also going to require rules by DAS. Then I can click this green button here, add new analysis row. Pick the rule status I want. So I think it's going to require rules by DAS. And then I add in the bill sections I want to be in my new row. So let's say I want 2 to 3 again. Click create new analysis section, and boom, I have 2 different rows dealing with sections 2 and 3 of the bill. I can put in alcoholic beverages in this row, then go down here and type new information down here for DAS if I want. In very rare occasions, I think maybe only Patty has a bill on this year. A bill might require 2 agencies to jointly adopt the exact same rule. That's kind of an outlier, but if it happened, then you would instead click this joint rule button, and then it'll let you add in multiple agencies. Like I said, that's very unusual. For folks that may have sections that implicate 20 or 30 agencies. Looking at you, Stuart, sometimes we will have a bill that requires all boards to do something. In situations like that, just come and talk to me first, and we'll put our heads together and figure out the best way to describe that. I will also note, again, this usually happens to me more than anyone, but another option, if it's touching literally every single agency, we can type in all and just put in all agencies if you're doing something systemic across the entire executive branch. Let's talk about some other things I wanted to note. There is no undo button in this program. That's on my wish list for future years. Also, anything you do generally will be auto-saved. You don't need to click anywhere and click save. Just once you've done it, it's in there. So sort of bear that in mind and think through what you're doing before you do it, because that can be unforgiving at times. Also, at any point, if you want to sort of see how it's going, look at a draft of what you've typed in and see if it appears the way you want it to, you can click this orange button right here, Generate PDF. Can folks see that? All right, that generates a PDF of what this chart will actually look like based on what you've entered in. So if you're sort of not sure if you're doing it right, you can always click that just to see how things are going. So, oh yeah, up here, if you have a bill with a delayed effective date, if you could come up here and just click this button, delayed effective date or similar provision. That's a delayed effective date, delayed applicability date, language in a bill section saying, you know, for tax years beginning on or after January 1, 2024. Those timelines are relevant information. Looking over my notes to you. Yes, about your question?
As the example you just gave as to the applicability,
Mm-hmm.
so that drop down you just showed applies to the entire bill.
Yes, I know it doesn't break it down section by section. It's basically just flagging the bill for me to pay special attention to. For reasons it's not necessary to explain here, I'm particularly interested in bills, one or more portions of which may be effective later than typically July 1. So we don't need to break that down section by section. I'll look at it later and figure it out.
Okay. I was in context of like the tax bill where there's any number of separate applicability and effective date.
Yeah, those are sort of, yeah, those are sort of outliers. When you get a big tax bill with a million divisions, all of which have different effective and applicability dates, you know, that's sort of an outlier. And of course, I'll catch that on my own.
Okay. So
this is, go ahead.
For each of the entries, then there's not a need for us to identify, like when you said linking the multiple sections.
For this properties thing,
am I linking the applicability section along with?
For purposes of this analysis, we generally do not treat like effective date and applicability provisions as directly requiring rules. Those govern basically how rules are made. So typically we treat those as no rules involved in terms of like how you handle them in the rows down here. But up here, this is just sort of a general flag to me that, hey, one or more portions of this bill will be dealt with after July 1. This doesn't tie to any particular bill section. This generally just makes a highlight pop up on my screen that tells me to pay special attention to those bills. Does that make sense? Michael?
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. Let's look it over. I think those are the main points you'd need to know. Once again, once you're all done going through all of your rows here and you're all finished, you come up to status and you click drafter analysis complete. That sends it to me. I'm automatically alerted and you're done with that bill. If you decide later for any reason you need to look at it again, just come talk to me and I can have it sent back.
One other thing to point out is that when you guys sign in, it's automatically going to have your role in the system. So like Jack mentioned, you're not going to see the review or analysis tab. You're not going to, it'll be grayed out in the last line of the table. So anything that you can't do is by design.
Yep. If you find yourself getting stymied and you can't do something it feels like you need to do, come talk to me. Yeah, you're over here. You should just, your drafter role is what you do, and that's what all your bills should be under. Also make a special note for particularly large bills. Leslie did a test run of this program earlier on her 2 code editor bills, and she finds the program starts to run a little slow once you're down into, section 100, 200, etc. What might serve to speed it up a little bit is if you take breaks now and then. If you spend literally all day on a particular bill, that can increase the system lag. Like I said, everything auto saves. So whenever you're done for the day, or if you want to take a break, you can exit out and then go back to it. And if you're like me and you're paranoid about losing some of your work, again, you can come over here and click this PDF button and generate a PDF that at least shows everything you've done so far. I haven't had any problems with the autosave, but signing out and in every once in a while might help speed things up a little bit for those extremely large bills. But to some extent, that lag is just unavoidable because the system can only handle so much data. There are relatively few of those bills, at least.
Hey, Jack, can you
Yes.
show us really quick how to add multiple entries for each of the sections? So if we have multiple.
So how to add in 2, 3 rows for section 2, or what do you mean?
Yeah, if there's multiple code sections or multiple rules, you just keep adding the normal
Oh, yeah, I
dialog.
see what you're saying. Okay, yeah. So let's suppose here we find 5 different rules that we need to deal with. We just enter those in one at a time. So let's say it's going to be 185 1.1, sure. And then it's also going to be 185 1.2. And like I said, each time this auto saves. And of course, if it were going to affect the entire chapter, then you can just say 185.1 and you don't even need to go down to the rule level. So yeah, you can add in as many of these as you need to. Similarly over here, if you're adding in code sections not referenced in the bill, you can add in as many of those as you want to. And any of those you're not happy with, like I said, just hit the trash icon and those will go away. So is that what you were talking about?
Yeah.
All right, let's see. Just take a minute. Does anyone else have any other questions?
So for the column that says code section relating to rulemaking, are we writing the section of the code that calls for rulemaking or the section that gives authority to the entity to make rules?
It's going to vary to the extent that your bill section explicitly calls for rules. That's all we need. The purpose of these two is to sort of identify some statutory source for any particular rule that might need to be made. So if your bill section says do rules or may adopt rules or something like that, that's all you need. If your bill section does not mention rules, but you think rules will need to be made or you're not sure, then we need to identify some other statutory source for that. Typically, if you're looking around, the best source of authority would probably be something else in that code chapter or relating to that program. Failing that, you may need to go more broad. Most agencies somewhere in the chapter that created the agency have a broad grant of rulemaking authority, basically saying they can do rules to carry out their responsibilities or something like that. Not all agencies have that, but most. So you'll sort of keep broadening it out until you can find some statute that sort of suggests some basis for this rule that we're thinking may need to be made. But in situations where your bill section explicitly talks about rules, then this box is not necessary at all. We just need this information to know what's in the act. So this box may or may not be filled out depending on what your act section says. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
All right. Any other questions from anyone? Emily, can you think of anything I'm missing here?
I just didn't know if maybe you wanted to go through how if you make a comment on the bill, they get an email back letting them know what needs to be changed.
I've found very little need for that function. That's sort of
Oh,
a
okay.
just in case scenario. To the extent that I need to give any feedback, I'll visit with you directly and we'll talk that through. We'll save time and not get into that today.
Okay, well, that's all I had then.
All right. Also, one other thing I'll note, if you find that you made a mistake, say you're adding in a couple new rows for an agency, a bill section requires rules by multiple agencies, and you realize I've got a row in here I don't. You can use this button right here and it will delete this row. Now, of course, you want to be careful because that row is gone for good and there's no undo button. Although you could always use this button here, the green button, anywhere to add in a new row. You can use this button, I should also note, this can add a new row for any bill section. So if I just happen to have section 2 in front of me and I realize I need to add a new row for section 137, there's no reason I can't do that. You just need to get to this green button anywhere to add in a new row, anywhere you like. Like I said, if you want to get rid of a row, you just come to this red button and that'll let you get rid of it. For any technical, procedural, legal questions or whatever, you can always come talk to me first. If it gets technical enough, I might send you Emily's way, but I'll be your first point of contact for this. Unless anyone else has any other questions, I'll go next. I'll talk through how I might approach a particular bill, and anyone aside from new drafters can go ahead and sign off unless there are any more questions. Hearing none, I'll give everyone a chance to sign off. Who doesn't want to see me sort of talk through a bill here briefly. Just reset this here and I'll start talking again here in a minute. Pay no attention to this. I'm just sort of resetting this. I'll resume transmission here in just a sec. All right, so as an example for talking through how I approach the rules analysis process generally, I'm going to use House File 384 enacted this session. I sent out a copy of that. If it's helpful to you, you can look at that and refer to it as we go. Yeah, that's sort of going to be my example. Yeah, here it is. All right, so when I'm starting to look at a bill, like I said, I really love merging when I can get away with it. So if I can figure out 5 bill sections, 20 bill sections, whatever, all deal with basically the same concept and can all be handled by a single set of rules, I'm going to try to merge those if I can. Now, of course, there's judgment calls on that, and if you ever want to talk to me about those judgment calls, that's fine. So as I look at the bill, first thing that strikes me, now all this is not to say you can't work through it one section at a time if that's how your brain works. There's no one right way to think about a bill, and it's going to vary somewhat from draft to draft or bill to bill. So however it works for your brain to process this information is fine. I'm just going to sort of talk through how I like to do it. One thing I noticed as I looked through House File 384 is we have a number of bill sections that only deal with the time on which alcohol can be sold on a Sunday morning. For the sake of freedom or something, we are moving that back from 8 a.m. to 6 a.m. So there are several bill sections that solely deal with that subject. So that's pretty low-hanging fruit, I find. So I'm going to try to knock out those bill sections first, because if I can combine some stuff and knock it out, I feel like that makes my life easier. And then I have fewer rows to deal with on my chart. So I'm not going to walk through this in detail because I've already done this, but in general, you could look for in Folio. Can you see Folio? All right. You can search for 8 a.m., for example. Well, 8 o'clock, and then you'd want to do variations, right? Like, the number 8 a.m., etc., and different variations. You can take my word for it. I searched the rules, and it turns out there are no rules specifically saying what time alcohol can be sold on Sundays by the Alcoholic Beverages Division. So if there are no instances in which I need to go into the rules and change 8 a.m. to 6 a.m., I can reasonably conclude none of those bill sections are going to involve rules. So this is where I'm going to get to merge my sections 3, 6, 9, and 10, because those only deal with the 8 a.m. issue. So first, I'm going to need to enter in a rule status for my first one, no rules involved. Once I've entered in my rule status, then I can merge those sections, 3, 6, 9, and 10. And again, no spaces. I click that, and poof, it is combined 3, 6, 9, and 10 here, and I have several fewer rows, and I've knocked all those out, which is nice and easy. So that's the easy part. Next, I'm just going to take it section by section because I don't see any other ones that can reasonably be combined. So for section 1 of that bill, we're making a change to the definition of canned cocktail. Again, I should say I prefer doing all this kind of research in Folio. I find that much easier, but if you like Solar or have some other way that you sort of interface with the administrative code that you like, you can go ahead and do it that way. But I'm focusing on Folio because I find that to be the most effective way to do rules research. So again, you'll see I've already highlighted the Alcoholic Beverages Division. I've determined they're the only agency that I think is likely to be implicated by this bill. You might have bills where you need to search the entire administrative code, which is fine, or you can select particular agencies as the case may be. So this one, I just want to see if they've got definitions of canned cocktail that might be implicated by the bill. Work on my spelling skills so I can spell canned cocktail correctly. And, oh look, we only have one instance of canned cocktail and all of their rules, and they don't spell out that definition. So I can reasonably conclude there aren't any definitions or descriptions of canned cocktail that are going to be affected, probably, by this bill change. However, given that there is at least this one reference, and it's sort of unusual that for a popular term to be only referenced once, I'll probably go ahead and reference this as rules authorized or implicated. Because when you look at this, again, you'll know your material from your bills better than me. I know this bill a little better than you, but you can sort of take my word for it. Looking at the bill section comparing to the rule, I don't think any rules are going to be required. But there's enough of a connection that ABD might want to look at. So I'll note that as rules authorized or implicated. Next, we'll go to section 2 of the bill. And that is adding in one single phrase in one instance after alcoholic liquor, wine, or beer. And it's specifically referencing Class C liquor control licenses. So I'd probably start off by searching for, and of course there are several different varieties of Class C licenses, but at least this narrows it down to like a small subset of rules I might want to look at. Again, you can just sort of take my word for it. You know, I looked at each of these and I didn't see a situation where adding in that one underscored phrase in section 2 of the bill would seem to require or implicate any rules. So I'm going to put down section 2 as no rules involved. And I should note, all this isn't to say that the agency may not do something unexpected and decide that there are rules that need to be done and do something that we as drafters can't foresee. This analysis is not binding on agencies. It's not perfect at predicting what agencies may or may not do. So if this isn't exactly right, ultimately, that's not the end of the world. We're doing the best here that we can. So skipping over section 3, because we already dealt with that, the 8 a.m. issue, we'll look at section 4 of the bill, which pertains, section 4 has a lot going on. It also has a couple references to the 8 a.m. issue, which we've already determined do not involve rules. This is a good example of a bill section where you got to look at several different elements. It's talking about delivery of liquor, wine, and beer, and adding mixed drinks or cocktails to the list of things that can be delivered. It's also setting certain additional standards for delivery. Now, as I look through these rules, a couple of key terms I'm going to zero in on are deliver, my wild card, and of course I'm going to get some false positives, you know, delivery of service for a contested case hearing or whatever. You know, you're always going to have to drill down a little bit and find relevant references. And then I'll also want to look at, since we're adding in mixed drinks or cocktails to these delivery standards, I'll also want to search, you know, I'll probably just start off mixed drinks. And I'll get some hits there as well. Now, after going through and analyzing each of these various hits, and of course dismissing irrelevant stuff, like we have a whole chapter on contested case hearings where we're talking about delivery of various documents and whatnot. So I got to set aside all those false positives. I'm ultimately going to settle on one rule that sort of clearly seems like it's going to need to be changed. And that is 4.5 sub 2, which specifically says mixed drinks or cocktails shall not be removed from the licensed premises. Well, as of now, they can be delivered. We're setting up a whole new delivery regime. So that sentence isn't going to work anymore. So I'm going to put down 185 4.5 sub rule 2. Which isn't to say they might not leave that rule in place and create a whole new rule chapter on delivery of alcohol in general or delivery of mixed drinks or whatever. That's fine. Just because we're citing this one sub rule here doesn't mean they may not take other action somewhere else. But this sub rule is our best location that seems to require some specific change relating to this. Now, you might look through this bill section, which is very long and has very detailed standards on delivery and whatnot, and think, well, it sort of seems like there should be more rules affected by this. As I and Ed, who usually drafts this subject, know, Alcoholic Beverages Division does not always do the best job of getting all their rules as detailed as they should be. So sometimes you may find, well, I'm expecting all kinds of rules on this very significant, complicated subject, and there just aren't. Or you might find something else non-intuitive, and we sort of take the administrative code as we find it. Now, while I might expect a chapter on delivery of alcohol, I didn't find one, which makes my life easier because that's one less chapter I have to have. So for subsection 4, we've just got that one reference. I mean, for bill section 4, we've just got that one. For section 5, again, we've got more stuff on delivery of alcohol. If I look around, this is only going to deal with wine, beer, mixed drinks, or cocktails. I don't find any, I'm not going to find anything super specific that seems to need to be done. I am going to zero in on probably this rule dealing with mixed drinks or cocktails, which previously could not be delivered at all. I'm going to note that as authorized or implicated because it strongly deals with the subject. Seems like something they might need to take another look at. But once again, this suffers from, we're adding mixed drinks into the delivery regime, and rules on delivery of alcohol are pretty minimal. If ABD in the past had seen fit to do a bunch of rules on delivery of alcohol, which maybe they should have, there'd probably be more detailed rulemaking necessary for purposes of this report. But this is not about correcting possible lack of rulemaking in years past. Section 6, we can skip over. That's 8 a.m. again. Go on to section 7. Once again, we are talking about delivery or, well, selling of mixed drinks off premises, which is how we get to delivery. What's particularly notable here to my mind is the amendment to subparagraph 3, where we're changing references to being sealed with a lid or other method, and we're talking about being filled in a sealed container. Ultimately, looking at this, we have our reference, our rule here, 4.10, on talking about sealed containers, but the language isn't detailed enough to really require any changes here. But again, I'm going to go back and reference that rule I talked about a minute ago, 4.5 sub 2, which again suggests mixed drinks cannot leave the premises. Since this section is talking about delivery, or at least for sale off premises, that sentence is going to need to be changed. And this is a good example where you might see rulemaking required for one particular rule and maybe another rule that's implicated. Typically, for any given bill section, we just settle on the most severe rulemaking category. So if a bill section is going to require rules in some instances, that's all we need to discuss. We don't need to get into more detail on rules that might be implicated as well. Lastly, for section 8 of the bill, since we dealt with 9 and 10 earlier, those are more 8 a.m. sections. Section 8 is changing the definition, or creating a new statutory definition of sealed container, as well as tamper evident. If I do a search for those two terms, sealed container and tamper evident, I'm going to end up back at this rule we discussed earlier, 4.10. I'm going to find that the backstory here is the regulated interests weren't exactly thrilled with the current rules on sealed containers of alcohol. So this bill was sort of intended to, among other things, sort of set statutory standards that would override these rule components to some extent. So when I look at this statutory definition of sealed container in section 8, I'm going to find that it doesn't quite match this rule definition of sealed container, suggesting this rule definition is probably going to need to change, or if the agency's smart, they just might say sealed container as defined in code section, whatever, rather than having to mess with this definition every time the legislature changes. So I'm going to cite rules 4.10 subrule 1 because the sealed container definition is going to need to change. And I'm also going to go down to look at subrule 3 here, this description of heat, shrink wrap, et cetera, also does not quite square with that definition. So I suspect that subrule is probably also going to need to change. So I'm going to cite both of those here. And this is a good example where you can cite multiple subsection or subrules or subsections or code subunits at a single time. So I've selected my rule status. I can go over here and type in 185.4, and if I think both of two different subrules are going to be implicated, I can go 1, there's our sub 1, and 3. So if you need to include multiple subunits, you can just type them in there in a single box, or if it's easier for you to process, you can have one row that's one box that's 185.4.10.1, and then another one that's 3 below. Whatever is easier for you to process. So that's a short version of how I would work through this bill section by section. I attached in the email sort of a PDF of what this would look like if I had sort of filled all this in as I went along. And of course, in this bill, like most bills with any nuance, of course, there's some judgment calls. And that's sort of the beauty part of having drafters start off, prepare an initial chart, and then I look at it and review it and see if I want to change anything or if I want to converse with the drafter, discuss it further. So that's our example. Again, for the newer folks, wondering why do we do this? Because, as I said in the memo, the Rules Committee, the Administrative Rules Review Committee, the Kate and I staff, wants to know that rulemaking isn't falling through the cracks, is not being delayed because the agency doesn't want to do it or is overworked or whatever. So this is all this data gives us sort of a baseline to track what rulemaking might be needed. That's presented to the Rules Committee and to agencies and is used for purposes of figuring out whether they actually need to do rules. For folks with a lot of bills, sometimes this can be kind of a slog, but the effort is certainly appreciated by me and certainly by the Rules Committee and by the agencies and by the Governor's Office, which is also really thankful to have this work done so they don't need to worry about it. Once again, are there any questions from anyone? All right, well, thanks for bearing with me for nearly an hour. And of course, you can always visit with me personally or call or email or whatever you like. And we can talk through any questions you may have, or if you have any feedback. There's a new tool. We're constantly making improvements to it, given that it's rolling out this year for the first time. So any feedback is always appreciated. If there are no questions, then I think we're done for this afternoon. All right, good luck, and we'll see you all later. Have a good one.